Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome and thank you so much for being here. Just I want to open with a little reminder. In February 2025, right after the abrupt closure of USAID, a few of us met to look at what could KM4Dev do to support both the people affected and the knowledge that was suddenly at risk of disappearing. The Knowledge Café became much more than conversation. It became an open space where people felt that they could share their views, concerns, experience, ideas, you name it. We were joined by Ian Thorpe, that is not here today, from UNICEF, Denise Martin, that is here today, who was also sharing the case of Argentina, with Piers Bokov bringing us the experience in crisis and support of the multi-donor partnership, and Tony Pryor, that is here also today representing USAID. Nancy White facilitated the session, and I supported with the technical.
And Stacy.
And Stacy was behind the hiding, but providing many inputs.
Still hiding at that point, yeah.
The open part of that cafe was recorded and uploaded on the KM4Dev YouTube channel. But perhaps the most important part was not recorded, was the open discussion, the exchange of ideas in breakout rooms, and the collective thinking that what we could do next. After the Knowledge Cafe, Nancy, Sarah, Stacy, I think, and Bruce wrote an article charting the destruction of USAID and identifying it as a new form of epistemicide, or death of knowledge. Sarah will share the link in the article in the chat. But this is really the background that brought us all together to this new cafe. A year later, sort of, because it was a little bit more than that, but we can see that something extraordinary has emerged. Considering the level of effort and the fact that this was not a formal project with an art structure behind it, none of this could have been done without the passion, commitment, interest, and willingness of many people to simply make it happen. That's the story we will look at today with Nancy and Stacy, helping us reflect on where we have been, what has emerged. But today is not only about looking back. The goal of this cafe is to source input on the future evolution of this effort. We will look at the platform that has just come out, yes, but we will also try to gather all your views, your ideas, your experiences, and maybe use this time to reflect and collectively make sense for the future. We also want to explore on how this effort can be expanded to include knowledge generated in other parts of the development sector, and how we can strengthen the ownership, representation of practitioners from developing countries in both the processes and the knowledge base that emerge from it. So in practice, we will be asking together what knowledge we want to generate, what knowledge do we want to use. It's clear we're not going back. So how this knowledge, it's important that we think how this knowledge can help us in the future, how we could like to be owners, stewards, or collaborators in this effort. We will do some practical group work and think together about this and how to move forward. And as you know, these knowledge cafes, normally there are 90 minutes. After 1 hour, many people disappear. I know you all have many things to do, but if you can stay, please do so. Because your ideas and contributions are really important. And the fact that we have this space to think together gives us a great opportunity. So if you cannot stay, do not worry. We will try to reach out to you afterwards and to find other ways for you to contribute. But if you can, please stay. And with that, thank you again for being here. And I'll pass it on to Nancy to take us forward. Thank you.
And so I'm just going to share a slide real quick with you to let you know of today's flow. Then I'll turn it over to Stacy. We've done the first part. Stacy's going to dive deeper into the story and some of the details that some of you may or may not know. And then we're going to do liberating structures to think about what might be possible, and maybe to get out of our thinking ruts is on the comment of, there's no going back. We really have to open up our imaginations and our different perspectives about what's possible. And then we'll synthesize that, and then we'll share some of the next steps that are emerging, and maybe y'all have some other next steps that you want to contribute as we cross-pollinate across all the people who are addressing this issue of what happens to the knowledge commons. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Stacy.
That's great. Thank you so much, Rocio and Nancy, for kicking us off. And thank you, everybody, for turning up in July. This is a July-sized Knowledge Cafe, which is just great. This community has been such a sustaining force for so many of us for so long. And I am just always delighted to have the chance to gather with people in this group. And I wanted to reach back a little bit. Rocio was talking about the Knowledge Cafe that we had in February 2025. That was such an important moment for those of us, on the inside still at USAID at that time, just struggling with what do we do? The agency was abruptly shuttered. There wasn't any planning for website disposition. There were no handover memos from staff. There was no plan for any kind of knowledge preservation. All of the contracts were abruptly stopped. And so all of our websites just went dark. The implementing organization staff were laid off. And then shortly after that came the mass firing of USAID staff. And what that meant was the imminent dispersal of decades of collective knowledge and experience and wisdom, not only of our workforce, which was about 12,000 people across about 100 countries, but the many tens, probably hundreds of thousands of people who worked with our implementing organizations globally. So it was a massive amount of knowledge that just disappeared within days. And, as we've seen in other sectors, so for instance, climate science and health, people who had dedicated themselves to working hard on behalf of the US government scrambled to preserve the knowledge. And this community, which has been working hard on behalf of the sector, development and humanitarian assistance, scrambled to support us, but also many of you were dealing with the consequences of USAID pulling its funds from your organizations. So World Food Program, UNICEF, and many others were likewise struggling with just the effects of what was happening here. That February 2025 Knowledge Cafe was super important for us. Not only for the camaraderie and support, which has always been a really critical part of this community, but because while we were, in the throes of dealing with the lost knowledge, dealing with the uncertainty at work, and then the persecution essentially that was taking place between our employer and its staff, we just were trying to get our heads around what to do. And this community was great. So a couple of the things just to bring us all back that you told us were, first and foremost, get everybody's contact information. So once again, acknowledging that even as the organization was falling away, the community was still there and would need to be sustained. And that has been absolutely true and essential to this knowledge rescue effort. One of the key insights that came out of that conversation, and I think Ian Thorpe from UNICEF was one of the people who articulated this, was, as Rocio said, we're not going back. So the notion that we should not be building for the past, we should be building for the future. The tricky bit is we didn't know, and we still don't really know what the future holds. But that, I think, is a really important piece of the picture going forward, and what we're hoping to get into today. So I just want to say a little bit more about where we have gotten to. And I do want to give a shout out to everybody here and everybody in the broader group who has been so essential to this effort. Nancy and Tony and I scrambled to set this thing up. I had a colleague who will remain anonymous reach out the very day that USAID's website went dark and offered a secure server at another US government agency. Toby Green from Coherent Digital, who's here with us today, reached out very early and offered coherence collaboration, which has been and continues to be essential to this effort. And Tanya and others, Zachary Baquet, Shannon Griswold, Lauren Lee Hinthorn, other folks who had been at USAID continue to be important volunteers to this effort. Uh, as well as other colleagues formerly at UN organizations such as Dvorka Milosevic from World Food Program, Brittany Persinger from World Food Program, folks just coming to join the effort and being incredibly generous because hardly anybody's getting paid. And folks are just putting in lots and lots of hours. A special shout out to Rick Levy, who's our tech lead and who has been working very closely with Greg Malley and others to set up the Development Knowledge Commons, which is the platform that we launched right at the end of last month. So we're super excited that we have reached this point where we are finally restoring to the public sector a large body of knowledge that had been gathered over decades of development and humanitarian assistance and then lost. And I want to be clear that this knowledge is both the documented knowledge that many of us relied on to inform our programs, but also the tacit knowledge that our staff and others carried around the kind of the art and technique and the deep contextual experience of how you do strategic planning, how you do program design and implementation, how you assess it, how you learn, how you adapt it. And Tony Pryor has been just a superhero in leading this interview effort, which has will eventually produce 300 or so interviews with former staff. So far, 20 group interviews. And Tony also has connected us to the Association for Diplomatic Studies and Training and their really robust oral history body. So really, we are delighted to be able to restore to the public sector this incredible knowledge base that was developed with public funds, belongs to the public, and is now publicly accessible. So that's a huge milestone for us, but it is also an inflection point. So, we knew that as we were scrambling to save things before they disappeared, that we needed to pull on, the frameworks that we had for how we had done development, how we organized ourselves according to sector, our networks, principally who we knew had what. We reached out to many of you. We set up the LinkedIn group. It's now got more than 2,300 people in it. We sent out the call for materials. We sent out the call for interviews and really leaned hard into that community that sustained even as the organization fell away. But I want you to know that all this time that we've been working on this, we have also been reminding ourselves that of that insight that came out of that Knowledge Cafe last year, which is build for the future, not the past. And the future needs to attend to this set of lessons that kept coming up again and again, increasingly, I would say, over the last 7, 8, 9, 10 years of development, but really has been a theme throughout, which is we need to change up the power relations in our development and humanitarian assistance. That a donor-driven approach is really not consistent with the development objectives that we articulate, and that there is so much wisdom and knowledge and experience and good work being done in developing countries, and incredibly talented and creative and accomplished development practitioners in developing countries. And those folks should be in the lead. Those interests should be in the lead. Those perspectives need to be reflected in what we build going forward. So really, we're at this inflection point now where we need to expand the body of work that we're contemplating for this resource beyond what was created by USAID. But we also need to expand the vision for what this resource is. We need to expand the stakeholder group who are engaged in articulating that vision and bringing it to fruition. We need to think differently about governance for this resource so that it doesn't, go back to the past and end up being this donor-driven thing, but really should be held, led, stewarded by people whose development is at stake in all of this work. So that's really where we are now, and that's what we wanted to talk with all of you about today. How do we work toward a future for this resource that is broader, that's more equitable, that doesn't rely only on a set of knowledge sources and types that have been determined by elites or donors or wealthy countries to be credible and important, but really take advantage of local knowledge frameworks, other perspectives, the kinds of things that the developing country folks know work in their context. So that's where we are now. I'm going to leave it there, but maybe folks have questions. I'm not sure.
So how we're going to take with questions, hold on a second. Take a minute to think about your questions, your observations, and I would like you to put them in chat, but do not hit enter. Just put them in chat, but do not hit enter. And we're not going to be able to answer all the questions, but this is a way of collecting insights. What kind of questions are people asking? What kind of ideas are people presenting that we can feed into the process as it develops? And some of them, Stacy or any one of us can answer right now if they're, easy points of access. But just take a minute to think about your questions, your comments, your insights, and then put them in chat and don't hit enter so you won't be distracted by other people's ideas. We'll just take a minute here. Okay, hit enter. And then scroll up and see what your colleagues have written. And Stacy and Rocio and I will look for any kind of informational responses that we can give right away, but the rest becomes part of this process today. Mary D., I love your question. Does this initiative transcend the KM community? And I have a gut answer, but I'd be curious what Stacy and Tony and others are thinking about that.
I actually put that in because what I do transcends a number of different areas, one of which is the library community. And by that, I mean at all levels of libraries. And it strikes me that it would be a very supportive community. It also strikes me that they have no idea this exists.
Yeah. And Kim, your comment.
Toby can probably correct me on that.
Kim's comment, that quite a few of these comments weave into that same issue.
Yeah, Tanya might have a perspective on that.
Tanya, you want to unmute?
Not to put you on the spot, Tanya. Totally up to you.
Yeah, no, I think my comments, and I think what Linda alluded to also, we have folks here on the call from other groups that are involved in information stewardship and have been at this, I think, for longer than us. And we can certainly learn from their experiences. I think we also, as USAID, is the first, as you all know, it's the first time in recent memory that an entire agency has been shut down. So our lessons learned, albeit painful, are definitely something that we can share with other civil servants and staff at other agencies, I think at all levels. And definitely, as a librarian, I am always thinking about how we can provide access to information and preserve it as a common good. So yes, I think there are many communities that we can learn from to help inform our work and to make sure that we can reimagine our knowledge sharing in a way that is inclusive and participatory and really reflects the stakeholders that are going to be interested in using this knowledge going forward.
Yeah, I want to echo that. And I also want to just flag that a subset of folks here were in Dublin last week at the KM Summit there and really engaging a different community there around a different set of issues that we're also grappling with respect to technology and how do we use artificial intelligence in a way that helps us synthesize from a large body, not only of documented knowledge, but also the tacit knowledge in the interviews. How do we figure out how to leverage that kind of tool in a way that also guards against people taking developed knowledge out of context, asking questions of the knowledge base that lead to that context dropping away and important nuances being lost. And Tony and Nancy have been working a lot on that, Rick as well. That's a place where we're also trying to learn from others and figuring out, how do we use the technology? How do we retain the context? What is the quality and governance people? How do we keep people in the loop to make sure that there's that context remains and that the quality of response is right, and also that the processes that knowledge is informing understand the bigger picture.
Tony?
What's funny is when I went back from the working group, it decided, well, I'll mute you now. Anyway, so just a couple of quick things. I'm not going to raise the issue of AI yet because it's such a big and important issue, but just a couple of prefacing things. Knowledge is not just stuff that's been written down, and this is really critical. What has been lost, and by the way, it's not that the organization was lost, it's the entire community around the organization. And it's as if, as I said, Dublin, it's like a wave has just swept away all of the sandcastles. I mean, there's nothing a lot of people working for partners have no place to go anymore. So to me, one of the big battles is how not just to capture the documents, but how to capture the knowledge inside people. People give up hope. I mean, this is a year out, and if you look at issues about PTSD, they usually hit about a year out when people begin to start giving up. When people start going through all of their Rolodex, people start looking at jobs, people start changing careers. And so to me, it's fundamentally important not to lose the people as well as the documents. So that's another thing we've been talking about. And of course, my model in all this is this community. I mean, KM4Dev in my mind is sort of a key actor in this. So I did want to mention that besides talking about how we link together documents, I look to this group to help us figure out how do we link together people.
And link together other efforts. I think it's been
of course
expressed subtly in the questions and the comments, but this is not a one point initiative. It can't be, because it would lead to the same risk of failure.
Can I just say one thing on this failure issue? I want to be really careful on this because there are people out there, including the people who closed us, who are saying it failed because they were crooks. I mean, we literally have Foreign Service nationals who are in jail, we've had some suicides. So we have to be careful. We're learning about failure, but we're not assuming that what was fundamentally done was completely wrong. It's really learning. It's positive deviance. It's what we could learn from this, but we have to be careful because there are people who want to reach out and make the other point. And I don't think that's really what we want either.
Yeah. Okay, so I'd like us to transition here so that we can be in smaller group conversations. And we're going to do something a little bit different today. And you're kind of piloting this. We haven't done this in a cafe before, but I have full faith in you. And we're going to imagine it's the future. And I'm going to switch to a screen share here in a second. There we go. We're going to imagine it is 15 to 30 years from now. And it is a place where development knowledge is open and held by everyone. Our younger generation has grown up in this world, and they don't know the problems we faced back in the 2020s and 30s. So we're gathered around a campfire now, and with the elders who remember the old days, and with the youth who are curious about the past. And Tony mentioned positive deviance. This is looking for positive deviance. What made this bright future possible? Okay. Now I'm going to put the link to the slides in the chat again, because there's some instructions here. And if you're like me, after about 30 seconds, I've forgotten the instructions. So I need to have them in front of me. So they're there for you. But Rocio beat me to it because I'm slow this morning. We're going to put you in breakouts of 4 to 5 people. And there's going to be roles. And one person will keep time, because once you get into these fascinating conversations, it's easy to lose track of time. One person is going to capture the insights, and I'll show you how in a moment. And the rest you'll divide into youth or elders. So if you're in a group of 5, there's one timer, one recorder, and then you can divide the, maybe there's 3 elders and 2 elders and 1 youth or whatever. It doesn't have to be equal. The next step is you're going to enter into the story, and maybe the elders talk a little bit about what the future looks like, how it worked out. And then the youth are going to ask the elders what made that possible. And for the recorders, and the timekeeper can help too, is capture what changed. It might be infrastructure, principles, governance, participation, relationships. It could be many, many things. Those are just short things. But how do we get from a rescue to a commons that's open, equitable, useful, and stewarded by the people whose development is under discussion? And I want to reflect on the observation in the chat that most of the faces here are white, come from the north, and this is the place from which we start that has to change, right? So you might have some insights on that. This is the part where if you need a hint about what kind of questions to ask the elders, if you're the youth, you can go to slide 10 and ask these questions. And those who are capturing, you could, maybe look at what, how, or who, and that gives you some sense of what's going on. Now we have a slide for each group. Oops, I forgot to do something. Capture the pattern. I'll put this is group 1. So when you are put into a breakout group, notice what group you're in. And I'll just do this on the fly. And so find your slide, and you can capture here. I'm going to look at your faces. You're going to be sent into groups, 1 timer, 1 recorder, the rest split into a youth and elders. The elders are going to tell us what the future looks like. The youth is going to ask how we got there. You have 10 minutes. You record in the slide that's related to your group number. And I'll stop here and ask if anybody has any questions, or if I've totally baffled you in a very short period of time. Are you ready for the future? Are you ready to look at it through new eyes? Okay, Rocio, are you ready with the breakout rooms?
Yes, they're all open.
Okay, notice which group you're in, and Rocio will send you there now. But welcome back. I had to go in and follow up some people to encourage them to take notes. I was being the nasty interrupter.
Yeah, I think we were on slide 1, and I think we had somebody else using that same slide. We were in group 1. So anyway, just to
Yeah,
let you know, there's some
that-
consolidation.
that was me for part of it, but then somebody was on our group slide, so then I had to move over to group 3's slide. So anyway, it's all
It's all works out in the end. It's all good. I think we've got everybody back now. So I'm curious. I before we synthesize and talk about the content, I'm curious about hearing from an elder and what it was like to be quizzed about the future. If you're an elder, tell me a little bit about your experience, and just speak up. You can. I'm watching all people mute their microphones. Not me, not me, not me.
I was a note taker, so I can't help. Sorry.
Okay. Any elders? What was it like to look into the future?
Okay, I don't mind starting. I put down, I like the engagement of imagination. I have a long-term difficulty with role play in any like training or facilitated activity, but I liked the engagement of imagination of like, you have to think about what this is because it's not something you read or some experience you've really had. And I think it could be a really good exercise done over a longer period. And the world doesn't generally like creative and imagination. It likes logic and so on. So I liked that.
Yeah, maybe there's something to discover when we step outside of the logic. How about a youth? What was it like to ask the questions about this or imaginable future?
Maybe in our group, Nancy, we kind of didn't stick to the roles because we were kind of getting into a very interesting conversation. It was a bit all over the place. So I'm afraid it was there, but it was kind of, it's kind of meta. It wasn't, we didn't have a youth in our room that was really asking the questions. But
Okay, so Emily.
Hello. So I was youth, and I'm thinking of somewhere between my kids who are 10 and like some folks that I know in their like 20s. And I think the youth are very concerned with the immediate, or at least reflecting on when I was in my 20s versus now, whatever is immediately applicable to their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't know if I really think too much about the past unless I'm in university and I'm made to think about the past.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we're going to do a little initial group synthesis. So I'd like you first to take a moment and look back at the slides from the other groups or even your own groups and just consider what you're reading. You might be looking for an insight from an elder, a pattern or a support system that made the future possible. So just look through it and reflect on what other people wrote, and then we'll do some chatterfalls and see what comes out. I love looking at the faces when they're concentrated in reading something on the screen. They're leaning forward. Okay, so here's the first question I'd like you to put into the chat. Share one insight from your elder's story. Was it compelling, surprising, banal? But share one, and you can do it in chat. And if you want to do it verbally, Kim, I see you raising your hand. Please go ahead and share verbally.
I thought it was interesting that Tony, I think, made the comment that when looking back at the knowledge that was rescued, that knowledge that was 60 years old was actually more relevant because and I'm probably paraphrasing this incorrectly, Tony, but the current business model had evolved into something different than it was 60 years ago. And so it was really good to look back at the older knowledge as well. Am I saying that right, Tony?
Yeah, that's good.
So you can write in chat or you can grab your mic and unmute. What insight from the elders?
So one thing which we mentioned at the very end, but we didn't actually write down, but it's mentioned in one of our other boxes. 30 years ago, I don't think many of us could have predicted the traumas that we're going through right now. But 30 years in the future, things like climate change, the northern inequalities, northern issues, as well as southern issues, are probably very hard for us to guess at. But the odds are it's going to be a quite different world.
And how are we prepared for a quite different world?
Probably not well.
How agile are we building our systems?
Yeah, one thing, a lesson from the elders that we kind of constructed in our informal way, I think, was this incredible fragmentation, silo, situatedness of knowledge, the lack of the low shelf life. So it was all locked up in projects and silos and bunkers, and it didn't live. It was not living knowledge. I think that was a big lesson that we learned as elders, that knowledge needed to really become much more alive and kicking. And especially, as you just mentioned, just very quickly, just read a report, the UK now security analysis of billions of climate change deaths related to droughts on the horizon, on our midterm horizon. So talking about a different world and agile, if we're going to be in such incredible crisis mode, I think that's what we have to tell our youth. That's, as elders, that's what we experienced. We couldn't fathom incredible acceleration of this multi-crisis, this poly-crisis, the social mayhem. We ain't seen nothing yet. So we'll be in continuous crisis mode forever on. From now on, we'll be fighting fires all the time. So that's why this who dimension is so incredibly important. And that's also what the youth were telling. I mean, I'm making it up, but that's kind of what we saw. The youth was saying, how in this very grim, unraveling world, how do we get that sense of community? How do we feel not so alone? How do we build that camaraderie that's so lost amidst all the onslaught of crushing forces from the top down? And that bottom up, holding each other and building small acts of resistance, food forest, whatever you have, your local level, that's ultimately the only counterforce against everything that's on the way, both from the governance, government, human world, and of course the natural world collapsing. So yeah, it's all going to be about the who.
Stacy, then Sarah.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention something that Aline talked about in our group that I think is absolutely spot on and totally aligned with the lessons that we keep learning and not applying, which is that in order to diversify both the knowledge and the knowledge holders engaged in this effort, we need to understand what are the conditions that hold folks back or that enable their engagement. And we need to put in place the conditions that enable their engagement. So if they're short on time and short on money, they're less likely to volunteer. So how do we account for that? And how do we mitigate the obstacles that keep us from having a broader and more diverse stakeholder group engaged in this? Really practical ways to eliminate those barriers to participation.
Sarah, you had your hand up before, and then you pulled it down.
No, I was really just agreeing with Aldo. I think we'll be dealing with sort of ecosystem failures and things like that. So I think we're in big trouble.
Yeah, I'm curious who the youngest person here is. If you're under 30, what are you thinking right now?
Do we have anyone under 30 first?
I was being hopeful. Under 40. I know some of you are under 40, but I respect your silence. So what else did you hear from the elders before we go to the next question? Go ahead, Rocio.
So no, I'm just hearing everyone, and I think that when I was mentioning in the group, there are things that happen when you work in emergencies. You work in a different manner. You become more human, if you want, with your own critiques, and you look at the work in a different way because it's all for yesterday, and you need to achieve, you need to help. So maybe we can also take some learnings from that and see what are the good things that make the work go better and maybe apply in the future.
Well, emergency work shows adaptive behaviors in rapidly changing environments. So that's an interesting perspective, is how do you design a system that has flexibility and give, that it can evolve, it can capture and apply learnings. I think there's a lot of criticism about, well, you captured the learning, but you didn't use it. And I think that's baked into the system that holds the knowledge. It takes a repository perspective on how do you integrate that into action, I think is a big question in front of us.
So one of the problems with the elder youth modality is the youth now will be the elders in 30 years. And so the question is, who continues to speak for those who are young? And because that's been proven to be a really difficult issue. We unfortunately age and get more conservative usually as people get older. So developing something that stays young, I think, is really a key thing, rather than just saying in 30 years, what is it like?
So you led us perfectly into the next question, and I'm putting it in chat as well. It's like, what are the structural things that we can imagine building, changing, stop doing? And I think what to stop doing is always a really important opportunity to understand and make space for what to do. But what, pattern or support system made one of the futures possible? What did you imagine in that? And, think wildly. Don't think, oh, we can't do that, or that's not doable. What if? And push ourselves beyond kind of the logical frame that we may fall back on, and also think it's hopeless. So what did you hear? One pattern or support system or structural change did your story bring out? And you can put it in chat, or you could speak it verbally.
Nancy, Sarah in our group talked about new ways of creating content and really evolving as technology evolves and as cultural practices evolve. So really taking advantage of the ways that people create and consume content in our work.
And Mary D., the structural change is going to differ considerably from one part of the world to another. So it assumes a diversity in the ecosystem, not a single way of doing things. Is that what you're alluding to?
I think, I'm reminded of years ago, there was a dance group that came and presented at the little town in which I lived at the time. And they insisted that none of it be recorded because culturally, they did not believe in preserving things. It was a very interesting perspective, and those of us who were not part of that culture were horrified. But that was in their contract, don't record this, and we're doing this artwork, and then we're erasing it. It goes against everything that I think of, but that was the way they thought about their production.
And think about what's made possible by that liberation.
There are various ways you can look at it. Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's not, I don't mean to say that particular performance was analogous to the knowledge that's been lost with the USAID dissolution. but it is a different perspective.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty clear we need different perspectives because just one could be a point of failure. Okay. I'm going to have a private conversation in public with my co-hosts, Stacy and Rocio and Sarah. We have the odd problem of being ahead of schedule. What's the matter with us? This never happens. And I just want to check in with my co-host to see what our strategy is. We still have one more prompt to go and then talk about the future things. But are you comfortable with this ending earlier? Because we also did have the 1 hour drop-off thing. Is that cool? Or is there other stuff we want to add to, or just invite people to stick around for informal conversation if we end early?
I'm fine with ending early, or if people want to voice into the room any of the questions that they put in the first Chatterfall, we can see if we could address some of those.
Okay. So Tony, I'll take your comment. We'll do the third prompt and then we'll let this emerge organically. So Tony?
So that, oh my God, I'm not muted. I'm so excited. This is a challenge for all of you here, and that is, these are great, but they're one-offs. How do we have this discussion continue on and evolve? I mean, I would love to have an organization that asks these types of questions as they go forward and evolve, but that's not what we do as organizations. We tend to, okay, that's very good. Now, this is your job, this is your job, this is your job. And I think whoever had mentioned it, one of our downfalls was turning things into blocks of work. And so I would love to have some way that KM4Dev allows us a chance to keep raising these issues every 6 months, every year, at various times, maybe informally, but to keep it maybe asynchronously. But it would be good to figure out some way of letting this dialogue continue, because it's all going to evolve. The one thing I would say about this is it's just too short of a time also even to deal with the framework that you had, but I don't want to give up on it at all.
Rocio, you want to talk about the KM4Dev subgroup? That's a direct response to that.
Sarah, did you want to jump in there? I can go ahead.
Yeah, this is probably a timely point to announce. That's what you're thinking, Rocio, isn't it? That there have been discussions with the KM4Dev core group. There are a few members of us here, Rocio, Denise, me, and there's going to be a sub-community for these discussions for the knowledge commons or USAID rescue group. So as part of KM4Dev, so these discussions can indeed continue. We're really delighted to say.
And that you'll share that information on the KM4Dev list. And those of you who have submitted to be members of the list, our admin team will be approving you throughout the course of the day. And if you haven't, Rocio will put the link in again for where you can join KM4Dev. And I want to scroll up and draw attention to Toby Green's comment about the UN report that found that AI is corroding our shared reality. And this is one of the things that we grappled with in Dublin a bit, and certainly have been grappling with in our group, is trust and multiple perspectives, and perspectives that have dominated versus perspectives that have been ignored, buried, persecuted, become essential questions. This is not just about how many documents are on a server. It's about what is our relationship to each other and to the knowledge that we need to make the world a better place. And if trust is gone, that's going to be a pretty big challenge, or a bigger challenge than it might be otherwise. So I appreciate that. And I think he put the link to it as well. So I'm just checking the chat. There's the D group stuff. There's also the LinkedIn group. And let me just grab that
You mean the
groups.
one for USAID Rescue?
It's in the slide deck. Never mind. I get ahead of myself. Sorry. There we go. Let's do the last Chatterfall, and then we'll share the resources and then informal follow-up of questions for the remaining time. But typically we don't have control over like 85% of what we do. Someone else is telling us what to do. The resources tell us what to do. But there's always this little space where we can do something. And I go back to Aldo's comment about little things from the ground up. You know, did I go weed the food forest, or did I connect one development practitioner in one part of the world with a development practitioner in another part of the world, or did I contribute to a conversation on KM4Dev? These are all things that are within our power. We can do them today, now. And I'd like you to think about what your 15% solution is, what one thing that you can, or even better, will do today, tomorrow, the next day, to begin to help us find a way to bring the knowledge that can make a difference in people's lives, and people can access it, people can make sense of it from their own perspective. It has equity built into it. It has flexibility built into it. I'm going to dream big, okay? What one thing can we do today that makes, even if it's a minuscule step forward? And I would love for you to think about that and share it in the chat. And this time I'm really going to push you guys to share it in the chat, because it is that insight into the little things that often gives us a foothold into the bigger things, even if we can't even yet imagine the bigger things. So think of that for a minute, and then please put it in the chat and hit enter when you're ready. One thing you can do.
These are great things that people are putting in the chat. I'm really appreciating these.
Yeah, a mentoring program is being the key thing to connect people.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen here for a moment here and share the next steps that's happening with the Knowledge Rescue work. You can join the Emerging KM4Dev sub-community, and we'll add that link to the slide too. So when you go back, you can say, where was that URL? There's a LinkedIn group that connects more broadly that you can join. And it requires a moderator to approve your joining. So give us a little while, and we kept up with that. And I noticed that some of you mentioned volunteering, which thank you. We are developing our volunteer structure right now, because we've been kind of ragtagging it with the urgency of the first phases, and now we're getting a more thoughtful structure in place. So Stacy, do we have an email or a way that people can express interest? And I know we're going to start posting volunteer opportunities on the KM4Dev email list. So I'm not quite sure what I should focus on here, Stacy. Help me.
Yeah, we do. Hang on, let me find it. And Rick, if you have it handy, you could plop it in the chat.
And we can get it in the slides too, so that it's everything there. And if you don't have the URL to the slides, I'm going to put it in the chat again. Oh no, I'm messing everything up. And with that, Rocio, Stacy, Sarah, thank you. Everyone here, thank you. And we'll stick around for informal conversation to follow up on questions or answers. But more importantly, I encourage you to do your 15% solution, because we have to start somewhere. We have to act. We can't just say the problem is too big, we can't figure it out. That every small step may lead us to understanding the next step and the next step and the next step. Because things are changing so rapidly, we can't wait for a perfect design. So stay in the game, and thank you. And then we go to informal.
Okay, I have a question related to the fantastic website you just put again in the chat, the developmentcommons.org. So I've seen that there are documents that you can download, but there are many being mentioned which have no downloadable possible. So what does it mean? It means that it's lost for good, or you were not able to put there because you don't have the copyright. So just
I'm gonna let Rick answer that because I can see his eyes responding.
I think that means there's just a technical issue. Our intention is to have everything listed be downloadable. And if it is not, please do use our feedback form or send us a message pointing to that resource so that we can troubleshoot. With where the platform is at right now is it is really just the initial stand-up of the very basic infrastructure for hosting the documents. We still have a lot of work to do on our metadata, our schemas, and we'll be sorting that out. And then we will be adding the rest of the corpus that we've captured. So right now, I think there's about 112,000 documents, which represent a subset of what was on USAID's Public Development Experience Clearinghouse. And so that was a large collection that we had where we had existing metadata. And so that was the easiest initial tranche of documents for us to launch with while we troubleshoot issues like this. And I think there might have been some issues where when those were captured from the deck, there might have been zip files that were inappropriately identified as PDF files. There could be some technical mismatches happening that we do need to sort out.
Thank you. No,
Rick?
that's great. Fantastic. And then another thing, because of course I was looking at knowledge and facilitation, and I couldn't find anything about knowledge. So there is no category. You can find it if you do a search, but there is nothing about knowledge. And I was thinking, oh, this has been done by the Knowledge for Development community and others. So why isn't knowledge one of the category?
That's a good point. And again, we were really just launching with this initial tranche of documents that we had from the deck. And we were using the keywords that were provided via the metadata that was captured when those documents were downloaded. And we do have a lot more work to do on our topics taxonomy.
Okay.
I want to just chime in and say this is such helpful feedback. And when I was talking about, we had to reach to existing structures to capture what we had, but now we need to pivot for the future. This is exactly the kind of input we need to help us figure out, okay, what does it need to look like going forward? So thank you for that.
Yeah, I've just added something in the chat. It's because for taxonomy, you could also use, of course, this is for agriculture, but Agrivoc, which is a fantastic thesaurus where you can find terms, and there is a logarithm behind. So everything has been translated in many languages. So using one term, using the Agrivoc terminology, that can help you a lot also for your taxonomy. Of course, not all the terminology is available there, but it's a great source. So that's just a hint in case you wish to use that.
I want to note further back in the chat, Dali, you mentioned the impact on your community. I don't know if you wish to grab the mic and say something about that so that we can think about how can the KM4Dev community be of support in this terrible time for you. And if I'm putting you on the spot, then forgive me and feel free to decline. But I can at least call attention to the rest of the group. What Dali wrote is very interesting conversation. Am in a situation where there were many donors in my village with half done and fully done projects. Some villagers have died The project officers left and project closed forever. Where do the villagers start from as we want to revive some of those projects and the knowledge acquired is lost?
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you for that question, because I think that question right there helps us think about how do we create something for the future. Like that question needs to be at the center of what we're contemplating. The problem that you're posing there should help us figure out, you know, the who and the what and the how of what we're creating, Dolly. So I don't think that we have good answers for you right now, but that question is so incredibly helpful.
Dolly came unmuted. So Dolly, you want to speak something?
Well, yeah, I'm trying to, but somehow, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, it's a little broken up, but we can hear you. Yes, yes.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay, yeah, I'm outside the house, so it's very windy because that's the only place I can get network. But my concern is, and that's not just for where I am right now, but I think it's a rural concern, if I can call it that many donors come and go, and at some point they come for meetings, they come with their laptops, and then they leave. And nothing, the villagers don't get any feedback about what they did well, what they didn't do well, or what is the next course of action, you know. And so they're left half-baked, if I can say that. Much as they want to, you know, continue with the projects, but all these projects have a timeline. And so, yeah, the knowledge is lost. Yeah. Some villagers lose interest. You know, they say, we've seen this before. They all come and go. And, you know, what do you do in such a scenario? Not just for my case, but in a rural scenario like that.
That is an absolutely essential question, and the kind of question that should be at the front of the queue, not at the end of the queue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it speaks to needing to really, you know, Tony mentioned something earlier in the chat, which is resonant with a book that came out probably 15 years ago now called Time to Listen, hearing from people on the receiving end of international aid, which is less money, more knowledge, right? And foregrounding, investing in local knowledge networks needs to be part of the solution, Dolly, so that question that you have is answered from the outset. A key part of any kind of development effort needs to be strengthening the networks among local people, local knowledge bases, local resources, and so on, so that local solutions are easier to achieve and more durable. So that doesn't help you in your current effort, but your question certainly helps us figure out how we build something for the future that is much more relevant for the people whose development is the focus of our collective efforts. So thank you for that.
Other questions for Stacy or Tony, particularly our two leaders who we have here today, before we think about our next steps and go do them?
So thank you ever so much for this. This is such an important issue, I think, and also really, speaking for the KM4Dev core group, we're really, really proud to have been involved in some ways at the margins of this initiative, because we think it's absolutely fantastic and really great that there'll be a sub-community. We're really delighted to keep both things together in some ways. I really had a question. So, you know, how do you think this initiative might be able to support not only UN organizations which might be losing knowledge, but also I think there's, you know, a broader issue. So how can you support smaller NGOs and community-based organizations, but also like quite a lot of older people like me who will be leaving the workforce, although obviously not leaving KM4Dev, KM4Dev soon, but how could we maybe make use of your repository to put our knowledge there in a place that it might be sort of safe for the future?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Sarah. So I think the first part of the answer is we are adding to our group of volunteers people from UN organizations. I think we're about to get our third person, which is great, for a group of fewer than a dozen. So that's really good. I think the second, to the second part of your question, that we need you to help us figure that out, right? Like, part of the vision for this is, okay, we've been focusing on USAID knowledge because of all of the contextual reasons that we discussed at the but now we need to expand it. This needs to be a sector-wide resource. So the way this began was through that exact question. People came to us and said, either I have something, where do I put it? Or I need something, where do I find it? That was the, and then or I know things, who do I tell, right? So that was the impetus for this effort. And that is not at all specific to USAID. That's just where it began. So we need people's help and participation and figuring out, how do we make this it is a resource for the sector, but how do we make it a resource that reflects the sector, right? And that reflects the sector much more equitably than anything in the past. So both the sector as is and the sector as we would like it to be. And Sarah, I know you and have worked with you on these issues, and I know that your thinking is leading edge in those issues. So we need you and everybody else to help us figure it out. I think Tony wants to say something, maybe the last word before we end.
Yeah, just to actually build up on Sarah on this. One of the things, we had so many people show up in Dublin from the multilateral community, but not as many from the bilateral or NGO or other communities. So the question is, how do we expand beyond that? That would be one thing. The other thing is, I think the key to this is, it isn't, one of the things that makes it more equitable is to think that knowledge comes from peer-to-peer exchange, not from passing a document. So it isn't just a question of how can I get my document to you, but how can you and I talk? And being able to have these conversations. Actually, knowledge often comes from, reviewing something and commenting on it and saying, from our local context, that makes no sense, that type of thing. So trying to have KM4Dev come up with ideas of how do we promote the dialogues as well as document sharing, I think innately leads to more of an equitable interaction.
You guys are amazing. Thank you. If you want to stay in touch, I think we'll put that link into the slide deck. I don't know who's doing that, but I think it's happening. I see Rocio nodding. And thank you all for your perspectives from different places, different domains, different ages. And thank you for being willing to be part of this, for those of you who are already in and those of you who are jumping in. There's work in front of us to share together. Thank you. And I'll stop the recording.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy, for facilitating.